needs didn't matter, you didn't stop having needs. You just stopped believing it was safe to express them. Welcome back to Conversations in Becoming. My name is Mickey Garcia, and I'm the creator of the Soft But Savage method. This is where we talk about rebuilding your life after divorce, learning to trust yourself again, and becoming the woman you've always been underneath the survival. This is episode 4, and I'm so glad you're here. So what if I told you that one of the hardest parts about healing from divorce is not actually healing from your marriage? What if I told you, for many women, the patterns that showed up in marriage were actually learned years, if not decades, earlier, long before we met someone and walked down the aisle with them? We spend so much time asking ourselves, why do I struggle with boundaries? Why do I always put everyone else first? Why do I always need reassurance? Why is it so hard to trust myself? But I think we're asking the wrong question. The better question is, where did you first learn that your needs didn't matter? Because for many of us, that is where our self-abandonment first began. Not the first time someone disappointed you, not the first time you got your heart broken. The first time that you learned that asking for what you needed wasn't safe or welcome or worth the risk. Most of us just assume that happened in our marriage, or during our divorce, or maybe after some big difficult breakup. But for a lot of women, it really happened much earlier. And most of us weren't taught in one big dramatic moment that our needs didn't matter. We learned it in hundreds of ordinary moments. A look, a sigh, a criticism, a dismissal, a joke at our expense, a reminder to not make things harder for everybody else. Now, none of those moments seem life-changing on their own, but together, they start teaching us who we are allowed to be. I don't really remember a time in my life where I didn't believe that everyone else's needs came before my own. By the time I got married, I already knew how to keep the peace. I already knew how to make myself smaller, and I already knew how to ignore what I needed if it made sure that somebody else was comfortable. This wasn't something that I learned in my marriage. It wasn't something I learned as a wife. It was something really I'd been practicing for most of my life. Looking back, I can see that obviously I wasn't born believing that my needs didn't matter. I learned it. Not in one big dramatic moment, but through hundreds of little moments where it taught me that it was easier to just be quiet than to speak up and risk upsetting someone else. By the time I became an adult, I wasn't consciously thinking my needs don't matter. I just lived as though everybody else's came first. Felt normal, like that was just the way it was supposed to be. I didn't really know any other way, because you can't choose a different pattern until you know one exists. So our first becoming moment in today's episode is that children choose belonging. So here's something I wish every woman knew. Children don't choose self-abandonment, they choose belonging. Every single time. Because belonging feels like survival. If you're little and the people you depend on seem happier when you're easy, you become easy. If you're praised for never asking for anything, you stop asking. If expressing anger gets you rejected, then you'll just swallow your anger. If speaking your truth causes conflict, then you'll become whatever everyone else needs you to be. Not because you're weak, but because your nervous system is brilliant. It figured out how to stay connected. Okay, so our becoming moment number 2 for today, adaptations become identities. The problem is we grow up where we just kind of believe that these survival strategies, that's our personality. I'm just a people pleaser. I'm just really easygoing. I'm low maintenance. I don't need much. Or maybe those aren't personality traits at all. You are not your survival strategies. You are the woman underneath them. Maybe they're adaptations that helped you survive. And once you see that, everything can start to change, because adaptations can be healed. Our becoming moment number 3 for today's episode is that healing is not about blame. I also want to say something that's really important. Understanding where these patterns came from, where they started, this is not about blaming your parents or your family or your ex. It's about understanding yourself with compassion. Healing begins when understanding replaces shame. Most parents just pass on what they learned. Most families just continue to repeat patterns that they never really stopped to think about. They never questioned those patterns. So this is not about deciding who was good or who was bad. It's really about noticing those messages that you received and making the decision for yourself whether you want to keep living by them. So here's the beautiful part. That little girl who learned to stay quiet, she kept you safe. She did exactly what she needed to do. But she does not have to keep running your life. Today, you're allowed to ask for what you need. You're allowed to disappoint people. You're allowed to take up space. And you're allowed to trust yourself. You don't have to earn love by disappearing. So I've got a few reflection questions that I want you to really think about. You don't have to answer them now. Maybe later, take some notes and just ponder them. Maybe you write in your journal, whatever works for you. But here they are. What messages did I receive about having needs? Which of those messages am I still living by today? And what would change if I believed that my needs mattered too? So if this episode resonated with you, I hope that you'll spend some time this week really kind of pondering these questions. Not so you can blame your parents or your family, not so you can just keep replaying every painful memory that you have from your childhood, but so you can begin understanding yourself with more compassion. Because once you understand where these patterns came from, you can stop believing that they define who you are. The messages that you learned as a little girl, those don't have to keep defining who you are as a woman. You weren't born believing that your needs didn't matter. You learned it. And what was learned can be unlearned. One small choice at a time. One honest conversation at a time. One boundary at a time. One moment of trusting yourself at a time. That is what becoming looks like. If this episode encouraged you today, I'd love for you to share it with another woman who needs to hear this message. And if you're enjoying this podcast, Conversations in Becoming, I would love it if you would subscribe and leave a review. That really does help other women find this podcast and be able to be part of these conversations. So thank you, as always, for spending time with me today. I know that some of these conversations are not easy, but every time that you're willing to understand yourself instead of judge yourself, you're already healing. So before we wrap up, I hope that you will come back next week because this conversation doesn't end here. Next week, we'll be talking about what it really means to stop waiting for permission from everyone around you and begin trusting yourself enough to give that permission instead. Until next time, keep becoming.